Hi friends, Joseph Varghese here, rulesforsuccess.com. I'm here with my good friend Croix Sather. Croix and I go back about 15 years, close to 15 years, and he's somebody I respect a lot. He's also called the Unstoppable Marathon Man. He's run across the country. When I first met him years ago, his calves were like that big. It was after a Seth Godin event here in New York City. He now lives in Colombia, um, and we've got reconnected recently, and it's been an honor. Croy, how are you, brother?
Hey, good to be here. Good to see you again.
Awesome, man. You've done some major feats. I'm a big fan of people who balance being entrepreneurs with being athletes. Much of what we do across the communities I lead talk about that idea. We're all peak performance athletes on this playing field of life. And that's how I see you as. You got inspired some years ago, I think 2011, to run across the country the first time. We'll talk about something you're declaring soon about that. Again, we'll talk about that since it could be like a first official announcement. Well, let's talk about your journey, right? You went from being a carpenter to being a world-class world record breaking ultra athlete, powerhouse, breaking records, and that to me, I'm in awe. I started running again in recent years, but you basically lived that life. You made a priority, and you did like the impossible, right? You did the absolute impossible, something like maybe one out of like 50 million people would ever consider doing, or one out of like, 100 million people would ever consider doing, running across the country. Talk to us about your journey. What do you got? And for our audience out there, you can watch the podcast here, live streamed. It's also on our website, rulesforsuccess.com. We'll have a mind map summary. We'll have some actionable tips here, and we'll also capture some tips. We have a separate podcast called momentumtips.com. We'll have 2-minute tips from Croy that will integrate onto that site as well. If you're not listening to the whole podcast. So, Croy, back to you, brother. What got you inspired to take that on?
Well, let's go through a super quick recap. So I ran across America from San Diego, California to New York. I ran a marathon a day for 100 consecutive days.
Wow.
So that's 26 miles a day without a day off for 100 days. And the question I almost always get is, why? Why would you do that? See, the run was important, that was cool, but it's not about the run so much as about following your dreams.
Hmm.
And that's what it was for me. It was about following my dreams. And so I had been looking for something epic to do, and I didn't know what it was. I'd studied Tony Robbins and, all of the greats for years. And a question kept coming up over and over, no matter I was reading somebody from 100 or even 1,000 years ago or a modern master. They all said something to the extent of, what would you do if you knew you would succeed? So if failure was impossible, what would you do? But I didn't know. And
Hmm.
I kept asking myself, what is this big epic thing I was going to do? And I had heard about a guy, Stu Middleman, who had run
Hmm.
across America. And I wasn't a runner at this time, but I thought that's the coolest, most epic thing like I've ever heard of. And so I was like, I'm going to do that. And so with 1 year before I ran across America, I was not a runner. I had no training. I was a carpenter, so I worked hard
Yes.
all my life, but I wasn't an athlete by any means. And so with 1 year of training, then I'm in California, leaving San Diego to run a marathon a day. But it's all about creating a life that you love. And
Yes.
you mentioned before in the introduction about, balancing entrepreneurship and athleticism and, everything else in life. And I don't know if I've been so balanced with that because I think we go through seasons
Yes.
where we're a little bit unbalanced. So when I was running across America, of course, I was very unbalanced in my life. I was
Hmm.
consuming everything.
Hmm.
And then other times I'm with when my kids were younger, that was all consuming for a while. And
Hmm.
so, I think we go through these phases and seasons of life. And I think it's
Yes.
important to realize that because people feel guilty about being consumed by one thing or another. And I think that's
Yes.
just part of life. And if you lean into that, I think you'll have a much better life overall.
Yes. You wrote a book back then too about your experience running across the country, as I recall. It's called Dream Big.
Dream
That
big,
was
act big, which
Act Big.
is
Yes.
back there somewhere.
Yes. See it right behind you next to the TV. Right behind you. Awesome. Like, tell us about that journey. How did it transform you? What shifted for you in doing that 100 days, a marathon a day? I can't imagine that. I'll do a marathon and I'll need 3 weeks to recover or 2 weeks to recover. I've got blackened toes, my toenails have fallen off. A lot's happened. Like I've done a number of these things over the years, but I need recovery. You do this every day for 100 days, crossing America from San Diego to back to Connecticut, back to New York. Is that right?
Back to New York City. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, what transformed for you? What shifted for you in being able to do that? Other than, of course, writing a great book and getting on stages and online products, communities, all the things you've done. What else shifted for you internally in taking that on?
Well, this whole the whole run was a big shift in so many ways because before that I was a carpenter trying to break into the public speaking arena, so to become a professional keynote speaker. And so, how do you compete with astronauts and NFL quarterbacks and business moguls and all these other people? You have to have something really cool to
Mm,
hang your hat on, if you will. And so that was part of what the run was. It was a marketing effort as much as anything else,
mm,
but it was also a give back event where I was speaking to a different group every day to
mm.
inspire them. Usually these were at-risk groups, people in challenge. So United Way, homeless shelters, addiction centers, halfway houses, people that were in some sort of a struggle in life and needed some motivation. So I spoke with them every single day. So it was a marathon a day plus a speaking event every day. And so I would do that because I was, because when I first had the idea of Run Across America, I was like, well, how do I make it about more than just me? And
Yes.
that's where these speaking events came in. But the transformation of that was going from the guy I was to the guy I wanted to be. And a lot of people ask me, what are you running away from? And as ultra marathoners or ultra distance athletes, a
Mm,
lot of them are running away from things. They're running away from addictions. They're running away from bad relationships. They're running away from all sorts of things.
mm.
Not all of them, of course, but many of them. And that's why ultra running appeals to them. Ultra running being more than 30
Yes.
miles.
Yes.
And these long, long runs appeal to them because they like to escape from life. But I wasn't really escaping from life. If I was escaping from anything, I was escaping from a mediocre life. And I
Mm,
wanted to live something better than
mm,
that. And
mm,
that was the whole transformation.
mm.
And I think the hardest part was just having the courage to be able to do it and to go forward and take the chance on that. Because, one, it was a lot of money, it was a lot of time. I had a crew, had all these things riding on it. And yet you got to take the chance. But my mindset at that time was I'm gonna finish no matter what, whatever it takes. And that's exactly what happened because I was absolutely 100% convinced one way or another, I'm going to finish. And my joke was, even if I have to sit on a skateboard and push myself across the country, I'm going to finish one way or the other.
I've seen that during the marathons, people doing that with skateboard or some device, and they're pushing themselves through, and it just inspires me. Or one leg, or it just fascinates me when I see that. And marathon years ago, somebody wore like a whole astronaut costume. They're running across wearing metal all the way. But of course, you're a very capable human being, well, full-fledged, strong guy who's probably still looks like in his 30s, even though I know you were a little older than that, and you ran this 15, 14 years ago. That's inspiring to me. And you also spoke each day to a different audience as you were
Yeah.
doing this, right? So how did you arrange that? Did your team arrange that in advance? So like, here's this decoration, you're going to run across the country, and you created the speaking engagements. So you'd stop by each of these schools or organizations to speak to on the way. Is that right?
I had a crew with me. So
Yes.
we were in an RV driving across the country as I was running. So I had a crew, a small crew with me, and then I had a crew that was working remotely that
Hmm.
was organizing all the publicity. I was on the news on every major city that I went through, and even tiny little cities. I was on podcasts all the time, and then of course the speaking event. So I think I had altogether 15 people working for me to make one guy run across America.
Incredible. It does take a team. It takes a
And,
village,
and
right?
a lot of money.
Yes,
That I
exactly.
paid for out of my own pocket because I was an unknown.
Mm.
Nobody knew
Yes,
me. I had no experience. I had no athletic experience, had no speaking experience to say, to get a sponsorship. So that came out of my life savings and credit cards.
amazing, incredible. And sometimes it takes that. It takes that kind of investment for us on that journey to catapult ourselves. And then we leverage that for what's next and what's next. And of course, that was a huge feat you took on years ago. That's pretty inspiring and did a lot of shift in your world, in your life. So beyond you can become a speaker, and by the way, you speak very profoundly, the way you connect, engage, and that's learned. Like, years ago when I left the world of engineering, I had to learn how to communicate, use my hands and tonal shifts, and this is who you are now, your identity. That's how I see you. What else has shifted, like, beyond becoming a great speaker? What else has, shifted? Were you an entrepreneur before that? Were you working as a carpenter as an entrepreneur, or did you shift into full-time entrepreneurship as a speaker, products and books and more after that?
I've always been an entrepreneur. When I was a young boy, I think I was probably around 13-ish or so. And I remember before my dad went into business on his own as a carpenter, he worked for a guy building houses. So he was part of a, fairly big company, and they would build, huge house after huge house. And we always struggled for money to the point where my parents often would have to go, no, I can't say often, but sometimes would have to go without food so that me and my brothers could eat. So they would skip dinner so that we could eat. But when my dad went out into business on his own, he would tell me something on a fairly regular basis. So like it really planted the seed in me. And what he said was my worst year in business for myself was better than my best year working for the company.
Mm,
And
mm,
I heard that when I was 12, 13,
mm,
14, 15. I heard it over and over and over.
mm.
And so I tried having a regular job and it just doesn't work for me. I'm a
Yeah,
terrible employee.
yeah,
Now, I don't know if I'm so much better of an entrepreneur, but I'm definitely a terrible employee. I'm a creative, I'm a visionary.
yes,
I'm not really good at details. So for me
yes,
to really succeed well, I succeed better when I have people that are filling in the gaps for where I'm weak. But
right
I
on.
also like to be a
Yeah,
solopreneur. I like not having responsibilities of other people. But when you're a solopreneur, that makes it even harder, to sit down and work and get the things done that you need to do. So the point is that, you got to figure out where your strengths and where your weaknesses are. You
exactly.
either improve your weaknesses or you let other people handle those weaknesses. And it just depends on what you want. Do you want a big crew and big company, big team, or do you want to do it as a solopreneur? I'm more of the solopreneur kind of type. Although that where I'm going right now, I won't be able to continue that. I'll have
Yeah.
to lean back on other people again.
I love that you're committed to growth. You mentioned Tony Robbins and other leaders you work with, Stu Middleman. And when we connected days ago, you were talking about you had gone through all these personality profiles, tests online, and it takes commitment. I have that, like, and part of my business is based on that. I know you're also in Success Circles currently. It's all based on knowing oneself and being better each day. And I'm in awe when I see people where they've made this a big part of their life. They're continuously developing, embracing that Kaizen factor, the idea of being better each day in all they do, right? Learning about themselves. Now, what caused you to get very passionate about personal development, leadership? Was that when you were younger? Was that parental influence? Was it when you're running? Did you have a mentor that challenged you to like read Napoleon Hill or something? Like what had you get on that path to being kind of addicted to success? And of course, success is not about wealth. It's about success in our lives, our bodies, our health, our relationships, our emotions, and all of that. And everyone has a different definition for success. That's part of our brand, Rules for Success, right? It's also part of my brand, Success Circles. What had you drive to embrace success, being better each day? What catalyzed that for you?
It's a really good question, and it goes back to when I was a kid, where it originally started. I've always been kind of a curious kid, I think, as far as I can remember. But when I was 14 years old, I was riding home on my bicycle. I was with two of my buddies. I was actually with one of my buddies and his cousin, and we're riding home. They're over on the left side of the road on the shoulder. I'm on the right side of the road riding with traffic, and we come up to a little crest in the hill. And as we're coming over this crest of the hill, a lady in the middle of the afternoon, it was Friday, June 7th, 1985. And this lady comes over the crest of the hill and she's drunk. And she
Wow.
sees my friends and she swerves. She overcorrects because she gets nervous for the kids being, on the side of the road there. And she never sees me. And so
Wow.
she crashes into my bicycle. My bike crushes underneath her big metal bumper. I hit the windshield and I flew 50 feet in the air, according to police reports.
Wow.
I was in a coma for 4 days. I was in physical rehabilitation and arm cast and leg cast for months. And it was a really long process. And I would have, from where I fractured my skull, I would have headaches that would drop me to my knees when I would have an episode. Literally would just drop me to the ground.
Hmm.
So it took a long time to recover from that. And it took a lot of years after that to regain my full mental ability because it had like kind of, for lack of a better term, like kind of scrambled my brain a little bit.
Yes.
And it took
Yes.
a long time to get that to go back to normal. Some people say I never went back to normal, but who knows?
Were you in like high school or eighth grade at that point? Where were you?
That would have been, I believe, ninth grade. It was the last day of school. It was ninth grade. We
Hmm.
had just come from McDonald's. We had an ice cream and we were heading home. like
Wow.
kids do, it was
Yes.
just young kids.
Yes.
But what I got out of that is that when I came to and when I was conscious, my parents would say very often, my dad was a pastor. He's like, God saved you for something. What are you going to do with it?
Mm.
And so that kind of puts a big onus on a person.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I
Yeah.
forgot about it for a bunch of years, but I
Mm.
used to get into personal development back when it was on cassette tape, and I would
Mm.
listen to my car because my brother would make fun of me and other people make fun of me. So you have to kind of be like a closet personal development person, to
Yes.
listen to it. But I remember listening to Brian Tracy and all
Yes.
the old greats, the grandfathers of personal development, and it always appealed to me. But what I got out of the accident is how
Mm.
fragile life is. And I
Yes.
think that's what makes me insatiably curious about how to be better, how to experience more. This eventually had led me to all sorts of things. I made a lot of money in real estate. I
Mm.
was a carpenter, but I flipped houses. So I'd buy houses and flip them just like you'd see on TV. And so I made a lot of money through that. And then eventually I became nomadic and I would travel the world. And
Mm.
it's all to try um, to fill that need to learn and see more. And my brother died at a heart attack of 45. I had a dear friend, a friend that we both know from the Marketers Cruise. He
Mm.
had a heart attack, and I think he was right about the same age. He was mid 40s,
Yes.
and Sean, and he left behind two kids and a wife. And so it's a reminder of how fragile, because you don't know what's going to be. So
Exactly.
when we started talking about 2 weeks ago now, again, when we reconnected, the new thing's been going through my mind that I had kind of forgot for a while is like, what if I'm only around for another year or two? I don't
Mm.
want to say another week or another month because that's a little too close because that makes the goals not like real accurate. But if you say like you only had a year or two, whether it's a plane crash or a car crash or medical or whatever reason, something was to happen to you. What do I want to accomplish in the next year or two? And
Yeah.
that's what's been going through my mind lately. And this is coming off of being sick last year to the point that I almost ended up in the hospital
Mm.
for severe anemia. And so that reminded me too is, how fragile life can be. It turned out to be nothing and we solved it, but it was just a good reminder to
Yes.
to do something while you're here, to be
Yes.
remembered for something after you're gone. And I
Yes.
hope I'm around. I hope you're around for another 50 years.
Exactly.
We're
Exactly.
more or less the same age, but I hope that we're around to break 100 years old, healthy mind, healthy body as well.
Yes.
But what if it's only another year or two or three? If I was to look back at the last few years of my life and
Yeah.
something was to happen to me and I died now, I wouldn't be very happy with what I've been doing for the past couple few years.
Yes.
I haven't been doing nearly enough. And that's where, all of these new motivations have been coming from. It's like because I've been too relaxed. I've been too
Yeah.
lazy in terms of really accomplishing anything.
Yeah. I completely get that. I gather that I've lost a few friends the past couple of years and around the same age, very young, and you're cognizant like how life is short and how do we maximize on this moment? How do we maximize the next few years? What's the legacy? What's the why? And I mean, I love that you've tapped into that before, and now you're kind of feeding into this again now. And it's people definitely need to have this message because we've gone through some unique times over the years. Like 5 years ago this month, COVID became a real thing, and now that's shifted and kind of that's gone, and now people are back to normal. And then there are people, kids have gone to school, they come out of school, and their expectations of the world are different now because they were kind of indoors for a number of years, and they're not willing to be responsible, to step up and show up. And something I've learned over the years, one of the greatest things I've learned is when we take on being 100% responsible, right? We start attracting everything. When we start being at cause, that distinction turned my life around years ago from being somebody who was somewhat maybe a bit lazy. And I mean, you're somebody who's taken on some huge feats. And it just seems to me that you're at a place in your life where you're doing that. You're really being at cause in your life. You're being responsible. You're showing up. And you're finding ways to even add more value, to even be better, and to like leave that legacy. And I know you have two kids, also, as I do. So what's your why? What drives you right now? What drives you to really step into who you are? Is it that vision of yourself running again, or is it something bigger than yourself? What drives you to be the best version of yourself?
I think one of my big whys, and it sounds kind of corny though, is my kids. And as I've been divorced now for, gosh, I don't even remember now. It's a bunch of years, like 10 years or something. And after the divorce, I kind of went a little crazy, as we talked about pre-show. And, I was going through a season of life because I had never gone through the college years or anything like that. So, I started traveling the world, and I lived a pretty wild life for a bunch of years. But then after all that faded off, and that was just me kind of running away from the idea of the divorce and things like that. And I didn't want to deal with that. So I went and occupied myself with crazy, stupid things. But then eventually it did catch up to me. And then, I kind of went into a low for a little bit of life. And I see this with a lot of guys, especially after a divorce or a financial setback, losing parents, these different things. I see this in a lot of men. In fact, they're my clients most often is men going through a divorce, going through some sort of big transition. And so, but now looking at that, always back then, and now the why is always about what can I leave behind? After I'm gone, how am I going to affect, what's the effect going to be that I was actually here? Is it going to be something worthwhile, or is it going to be I'm just another person who lived a nondescript life and just they're gone? Because there are a lot of people like that. And it doesn't have to be like becoming a Tony Robbins or an Elon Musk or, name your character. But what is it in your world? I learned this from Seth Godin. How do you change your world, the people in your world, leave a legacy behind for your world? And so that's what I'm working on now. So I'm getting very serious about books and, creating podcasts, creating videos, and doing all the things I should have been doing all these years. But I was just goofing around and having too much fun, traveling the world and doing all these things. I was very successful with that stuff. And I was right on the cusp of being a household name, like name any of your authors. But then going through the divorce and everything, my life just got turned upside down. And I didn't realize it at the time. And this is important for guys to realize that sometimes you do just need to take a step
Yes.
back. Sometimes you just need to go through, if you want to call it a dark season or a recovery season of life.
Yes.
Sometimes that happens. And
Yes.
don't feel bad about it. Just accept it. And then when you start to come out of it, then go full force into creating an amazing life.
There's a book called 10x is easier than 2x. It's
Yes.
by Ben Benjamin Hardy. There's a whole section in the book about that idea that to be the greatest athletes, we also need to 10x our recovery. And whatever that looks like for each person, it could be taking time off from life. It could be disconnecting. I believe maximum engagement demands maximum relaxation. I've gone through the stages in my life years ago when I left the corporate world to discover myself traveling, exploring, got married in my late 30s. So I completely get that. And just as every athlete and the distinction they make in that book, and also Dan Sullivan talks about this in his work, is that to be able to perform at a high level in life, in business, it does take taking time off. Most great athletes, the Michael Jordans, or even the actors in movies, athletes or on the movie field, the performers there take 2 to 3 months off a year. So there are seasons in life, and that's 3 months is a season, right? You can think about that like we're in spring now. So I acknowledge that, right? And I love that you're back on track toward what's next. And what is next for you? So you ran across the country, wrote the book, you had a whole team with you, then you travel around the world. You're living in Colombia right now. What's next for you on this journey? You mentioned a journal, right? You mentioned it's called the Unstoppable Journal. We can talk about that. What's next for you on this journey of life?
It's it's good to remind people that sometimes you go through, like you were talking about seasons, sometimes those seasons last a bunch of years. So for a guy, your 20s is one season. And it seems to be more or less correlated with the decade. 30s is another season, and then 40s and then 50s. These are all seasons of life. And so I'm coming out of a season where I was, super successful. I traveled the world and I went goofing around. And now I'm switching into a new season where I realize my runway before I become an old guy is very, very short. When you're in your 40s, you think you're old, but you're not old yet, not
Hmm.
even close.
Right.
And when you're 50s, you're still not old, but you're getting close to being old.
Yes, yes.
And so I'm seeing that runway getting shorter and shorter, literally, by the day. And so now I want to accomplish something great. And Wayne Dyer and a lot of other great authors, Jack Canfield, all of those authors like that, the ones that we grew up with, they didn't really get into their stride of life until their young 50s. So right where I'm at now. And so now it just kind of makes sense. I've had all my fun. I've done all those other things. I've spoken around the world. I've got paid 20 grand for an hour talk. Those things are all great and cool, but now I'm really after what's next. And I was asking myself over and over and over, what do I want to do? Because nothing's really exciting me lately. And I was like, well, what have I done in my life that really truly lit me up like
Mm.
nothing else? And it was run across America.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm going to do it again. Now
Wow.
I'll be 55 when I do it. So I'm not, a spring chicken in a
Yeah.
sense, like in terms of, being in your 30s or 40s, but I'm going to do it different this time. I'm only going to run like maybe a half marathon or so a day. But the idea behind it is I want to interview people that have led an extraordinary life. And I want to contrast to people who have missed their dreams or even given up on
Mm.
life
Mm.
and contrast that and bring it all in the umbrella of mindset. What makes a person successful and what happens to a person who isn't successful and bring that together. So to contrast those things. And then I imagine I'll do it for a fundraiser too. I haven't figured that out yet, but it's just, I was so excited and so alive when I did that. So why not do that again?
Exactly. Yes.
And running a half marathon a day, even in my 50s, that's not a really big deal. Yeah, sure, it's work, but it's not a big deal. Running a marathon a day, now that's hard.
Yes. So we're talking about 200 days basically. The last time was 100, it was 100, 100, basically it was one marathon a day for 100 days. Is that right? The math?
Yeah.
So now it's like basically 200 days, a half marathon a day, 13 point, whatever, like 13.2 miles.
Yeah, I don't know what it'll be.
13,
It'll be
13,
12, 13, 15 miles a day, which is
wow.
very achievable. That's
Yes.
because your body's designed to run about half marathon a day. That's how
Yes.
we're biometrically designed because we've always been runners or movers in some level throughout all of history.
Mm.
Above that, of course, we can do it, but we're not designed for that for optimum efficiency. So I'll be maxing out what the body's capable of. That way, I'm not nearly as tired as I was when I was running a marathon a day. I'll have a lot more time and a lot more energy to be able to do these other things that I want to do. And it's about creating a documentary and contrasting, the mindset of successful people compared to the mindset of people who have not been successful.
Incredible. Incredible. I love that you're building this village again to make it a reality, making it sustainable in your 50s, 55. It's a good number to make it happen. That's exciting. It really is. And I'm sure for a lot of people watching this, especially men, but anyone watching this,
Everybody.
the opportunity to get uncomfortable is there, right? Like I find that it's in those experiences of getting uncomfortable in life that opportunity shows up. We're willing to make shifts. For me, I had a car accident years ago when I'm my early 20s that had me shift careers, shift paths. And there are other breakdowns, other issues I've had back then that had me re-wake to life in the moment. And I love that in your 50s, you're really stepping into that for yourself. Like what's next? And recognizing that this is what helped you in your 30s, right? Step into do your next phase of life. And this is great. And I love that you've spoken on stages, you've spoken on my stage before the power team. I love that you're looking to inspire again.
And,
It's
and,
great.
and that brings up an interesting point too, because when I was switching from carpenter to wanting to become a keynote speaker,
Hmm.
I thought that was an incredible life that I wanted. And I did that for a while and I made really good money at it. But after doing it, I realized, this isn't exactly what I want to do. I don't want to be in an airplane living in hotels that are usually attached to the airports as well. That became very played out and boring after a very short period of time. The money was good, but life to me, I'm not that motivated by money, or at least historically, I haven't been.
Hmm.
But now I want to create it all, as Garrett White says, have it all. And
Yes.
so I want that. I want the great relationship. I want the crazy amounts of money. I want to be super wealthy, and I want to be living the life that's truly adventurous and making a difference in life. So that's what I'm going at. That's my season now is how do I get it all and live the life that I want to live at full maximum velocity, if you will.
Awesome. Full throttle. That's amazing.
Full throttle.
Awesome, brother. What are some things you do each day? So we'll go into momentum tips and it'll go into a separate podcast, momentumtips.com. We'll make sure we add this to that. What are some tips that you have? Maybe some routines, rituals you embrace on a daily basis, maybe in the morning, evening, during the day that keep you engaged in making progress, that keep you maybe, it could be meditation. You mentioned journaling. I know you have a journal called the Unstoppable Journal that's being launched. What are some things you do each day to keep you engaged in the moment in making progress?
There's a couple things. One is you got to have a clear vision or a clear goal of what you're working towards. Because if you have a clear goal, especially one if you're super motivated by it, it makes everything else easier. If you're just trying to accomplish things for the sake of accomplishing them, or because somebody else told you to, yeah, maybe you'll accomplish it, but there's not a whole lot of fulfillment or enjoyment out of it. So have a goal that really excites you, whatever that is. And your goal, that could be something for now, and then next month it could be something else, or next year it can be something else. So what is your big goal for right now? Exercise every single day or most every single
Yeah.
day. Because if you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
Right.
You could have, if you have your health and you have 100 problems, you have 100 problems. But if you don't have your health, now you have one problem.
Mm.
And so if you don't take care of your health, and last year I was reminded of that, I didn't realize how difficult life was when I didn't have my health until I got out of it. So health is super important. I'm just as strong and pretty much as fast as I've ever been at 55 at any other time in my life. I can bench press as much as I could when I was in my 20s. That's a pretty cool thing. And you don't have to be that healthy, but the idea is to be healthy. And then you've got to have some sort of a ritual. Morning rituals are best because it starts your day and it sets the theme for the day. As you talked about, my journal, Unstoppable Journal, which used to be called Dream Big Life Journal. I've just rebranded it. So it's an updated version.
Mm.
And that's how do you get the clarity? How do you create the momentum? And how do you create your routine so that you succeed? And those are all super important. And lots of people talk about this stuff. The difference is that I talk about it from experience as compared to some theoretical stuff. I actually live it. And that's what the Unstoppable Journal is about.
Incredible, brother. Well, you're on the court. That's like a distinction that we share in our community quite a bit. Getting on the court versus being on the sidelines. The magic is getting on the court in the game, playing, being out there, adding value. And I love how you marry those things together at the same time. I haven't heard anyone do it the way you're doing it. We found a way to run and then speak. I follow David Goggins. Like I love his work. I read his book and all of that. But you're building something. You've done this before. It's like muscle memory, where every day you get to speak at places and add value. And that to me is pretty amazing. I'm also into the idea of like our bodies are chemical factories. So when we run, there's dopamine. We can
Yeah.
leverage that dopamine. Before this call, I did a cold plunge. So once again, just dopamine in my system, leveraging that. And so I love that you're engaging in those healthy chemicals in the body to find ways to add value to audiences, to schools, and that to me is powerful. It's really, really extraordinary. And to capture that in a journal for yourself and have the clients and people you're challenging to capture that, Unstoppable is really a great brand for that. So it's awesome.
And this is a good reminder too, is my life, no matter how good it's going, historically or now, my life is still messy. And I think most people's lives are very messy. If they're not messy, I think they're usually very boring. And so if you're out there trying to achieve big things, embrace the mess and don't worry about everything having to be perfect. I grew up and my parents wanted everything to appear to be perfect. And I hated that. I think that's why I embrace the mess so much, and it's okay. And if you're listening to this and you're out of you're overweight, you got too much body fat, if and when you get into great healthy shape, you'll look back and how could I have lived like that? And you don't have to be like huge and obese or anything. Even if you're just not in shape and then you get into shape, the difference of your quality of life, not only in your physical aspects, but your mental and your emotional aspects, as you talked about the dopamine factory,
Yes.
it just, you feel amazing. The clothes plunge, the exercise, running or push-ups or whatever, you just feel good when you're healthy. And so I'm a
Yes.
huge proponent of that. I don't teach health, but I'm a huge proponent of being the maximum health that you could be in. And it doesn't take much. I exercise for 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, unless I'm training for something like Run Across America. My normal health is 20 to 30 minutes a day, and that's it. Eat healthy, exercise every day. It doesn't take much. It's not
Yes.
as hard as people make it sound. All these idiots on social media that are saying, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this, you got to worry about your macronutrients and all this other garbage. Yes, if you're at that
Mm.
level, that's great. But the average person needs 20, 30 minutes a day. And that's all it takes to be super healthy, fit, low body fat, feeling absolutely extraordinary. And that's part of having the morning routine so that these things get it done. It's why they're important. Journaling is important because you get rid of the mind garbage and you also get clarity on where you're going. All these, it's so simple. And you're supposed to, as a marketer, you're supposed to make this stuff sound like so sexy and romantic and you got to have this. And I got this miracle cure and everything. No, fundamentals, fundamentals.
Exactly.
John
Yes.
Wooden his guys shoot 3-point shots over and over and over for thousands of times so that they wouldn't screw it up when the game was on the line. Fundamentals make the difference in life.
Incredible, brother. I love that. One of the one thing you said that I captured that we embrace as our philosophy in success circles and some of the other ventures that we have. So I agree. Fundamentally, health is wealth. Having that be a priority provides everything. Like putting on the oxygen mask ourselves is so invaluable. So we can show up
Absolutely.
for the people, our business, for our clients, the people we're out to serve. So vital. I learned that at a young age. My mom had a heart transplant 30 years ago. I learned that at a young age, the value of that. We embrace this idea in success circles. The idea is that we're all peak performance athletes on this playing field of life. And when we see ourselves as being athletes, managing energy becomes an easy thing to access because we see we're at our identity level, we're an athlete. And I see that for you. You're like an athlete in life. You're playing, you're running, you're stepping up. It's absolutely brilliant. And you teach people that at the same time. When you can make that a fundamental part of who you are on an identity level, great things can only arise because we're able to give more of ourselves into the moment, right? And of course, tomorrow's not promised. However, being healthy and strong and having our minds, there's a better likelihood that tomorrow will happen, right? Because of that. No guarantees. I have a good buddy of mine last year was a bodybuilder. One of my coaches that I worked with for years, he was in Thailand. He passed away, age 44. There's no guarantees in life, but
You're not, no.
there's still a better chance that you'll go to the next level and help other people rise there as well by staying healthy and strong. So I love that as being a core part of your message. It inspires me to be a better person, a better athlete myself when I hear you doing this. Any final words for our audience? Any final tips you'd offer them? And then we'll go into how people can engage with you further.
Well, first, before I tell you that, I'll share one last story with you. Since reconnecting with you and getting into success circles, your group, you're good at something. You really inspire me, and something I want to model more of is the way you're connected with so many people. And for years, I kind of went into the hermit phase of life. You know, my life was so public for a while. Then I went into the hermit phase. Now I'm coming out of that. But meeting up with you again and seeing what you're doing and your group is doing and being part of it now is really changing my life and bringing it up to another level. So thank you for that. I'll share this one last story for you. And this is in my one TED talk. Had two different TED talks. And I forget how old I was. I was in my 20s at some point. I was with a couple of buddies. We're watching a baseball game. We're watching the New York Yankees. And we're up in the cheap seats because we didn't have any money. And so we're like way, way up in the nosebleed seats. And we're watching the game. And we're more goofing around than anything than watching the game. And we're talking. And my buddy says to me, you know, look at these guys. They're living their lifehood dream. And I paused for a minute and I thought about it. It's like, it's not just the baseball players, it's the coaches, it's the umpires, it's the freaking bat boy. He's even living his dreams, which the bat boy isn't actually a boy. They just call him that. But you know, these guys are all living their dreams, and yet we're up in these super cheap seats just watching life go by. And that was a big turning point for me. Is like you can be in the cheap seats watching everybody else live an amazing life, or you could actually be in the game. And that was a turning point for me to actually get in the game and to live life at the biggest level that I could. And it's a metaphor for life. And the majority of people, they're just watching life go by, watching Netflix series and, you know, binge Netflix and, you know, not going to the gym, not taking care of themselves, working for someone else at a job they don't really like. I got nothing against corporate jobs, but I do if you're working at a job you don't like. And
You're dying each day,
you're
perhaps.
dying, your soul is dying every day. So the question is, are you going to continue to live in the cheap seats, or are you going to use this as an opportunity to start living the life you've always wanted to live?
Amen, brother. Really powerful, really extraordinary message right there. How do people connect with you? So you have a lot of wisdom. Of course, you've got this journal that's there, it's being launched. How do people relaunched, right? Rebranded. How do people connect with you and your wisdom?
The best way, of course, is through all social medias. It's the same as my name. My name is kind of strange, so you'll have to look in the notes below. But croixsather.com is where everything is. That's my
Amazing.
personal website.
It's Croix, Croix, Sather. Like as in Croix, as in Saint Croix, right? The
Yes.
island of Saint Croix, Saint,
Or the
Saint.
drink, LaCroix.
There you go. Awesome. So this has been
croixsather.com.
CroixSather.com. This has been a privilege having you. For our audience, go to rulesforsuccess.com and you can access the recording, the transcript, the summary, the AI summary, as well as a mind map. something I love doing as an engineer is we kind of mind map all the core parts of the message as well as Croy's contact and website. So you'll have that on our website, rulesforsuccess.com. Brother, it's been a privilege. It's great having you in our community. Our tagline, or how we end every conversation, is you win, I win, we all win. And we challenge everyone to win, knowing that as they go out and win, everyone around them is inspired to win at the same time. So I appreciate that. We're going to end the live stream. This has been a fantastic conversation. Once again, reach out to Croix, CroixSather.com, rulesforsuccess.com for access to this podcast, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.